45 week on the Paper Crafters Library blog. Every day this week we'll be featuring different projects using Graphic 45's gorgeous tropical Travelogue collection. Today's project is this set of Seaside holiday decorated glass coasters and coaster holder, and I've broken it up into two separate videos. In this video I'm going to show you how I altered the glass coasters. Now, one of the things I love to do is to visit my local thrift stores or antique stores in search of junk that I can turn into treasures simply by altering it. Now, this is an example of one such find. It was a coaster set of these 4 glass coasters in a wooden holder. Now, I've already gone ahead and altered the other coasters, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this video. But if you look at the coaster, you can see the surface of the glass is quite scratched up. And the back, I think this was meant to hold photos because it has this foam piece. But when we're done with this, it's going to be beautiful. We're also going to alter this, which as you can see, it's quite chipped up and banged up. And I got the whole thing for $3. Now, the paper that I decided to use for this were these 2 patterns that come from the Graphic 45 Tropical Travelogue collection. This one came from a pattern called Exotic Destinations, and I'm using some of the remaining pieces in one of my mixed media canvases. And then this fish paper comes from the Oceania pattern. And I've cut this down to size to fit my coaster. Now, whenever you're altering anything, of course, you do want to make sure that you measure the piece that you're altering. So I just simply took my ruler, and it was measured 3 3/4 by 4 1/4. And I cut my paper down to that size, and then once I place it on top, I look to see how it fits. And if it looks like it needs to be tweaked or adjusted, I just go and shave off slivers until I get a perfect fit. Now, to stick it to my coaster, I'm going to be using one of my favorite mediums to use by Ranger. It's this Claudine Helmuth Studio Multi-Medium Matte. I also have here a flat paintbrush, which I always keep in water close to me, and I have a towel nearby, so I'm just blotting the water from my brush because I want to get off any excess moisture. To get the paper onto the coaster, it's a simple application of a thin layer of my medium. And you don't want to go overboard, because if you saturate your paper too much, you put too much of this on there and it soaks into your paper, what will end up happening is you will get bubbling of the paper. Now, bubbling of the paper is very hard to avoid when you're doing collaging and decoupaging, but with the tips I'm going to share with you, you can minimize that from happening. So once you have your medium applied in a thin layer, you just take your pattern paper and you lay it on the surface of your coaster. And then I like to use either a brayer, and all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to work any air bubbles out and make sure this is perfectly smooth against the side of my coaster. I'm also just going to take a wipe here quickly to wipe any medium that ended up on the glass. Now, if you don't have a brayer, you can also use something like this, which is a craft scraper by Ranger, and you can just use that working from the center outwards, making sure that your paper is firmly adhered to your surface and there's no air bubbles underneath. So now that I've got that applied, you can see what that looks like. I'm going to take my heat tool and I'm going to dry it to remove any excess moisture that may still be there from the medium underneath. With this now dry, I'm going to take my brush and I'm again going to put on a coat of medium, this time on top of the paper. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm sealing the paper in between layers of the medium. I have the medium underneath and I'm now putting the medium on top. This is also going to enable me to alter the paper, to add my own touch to it with other mediums, without it seeping into the paper. This is going to increase my working time of those mediums on the surface of my coaster. Now, I'm doing this in a couple of layers. Of course, just wiping this off the edge of the glass. And I'm going to dry it, then I'm going to apply a couple more coats. So I applied 3 thin layers of my multi-medium matte, and I've dried it in between. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of shading around the edges. And for that, I'm using one of my Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Big Brush pens. And this is color number 156, or Cobalt Green. Absolutely love these pens for my mixed media work. They have India ink inside. They'll dry on pretty much any surface, waterproof and permanent, But what's really nice about them is they don't dry immediately, so you have a little bit of working time with them. And that's why it was important to put the medium on there, because the medium is going to give us that working time. If you're just doing it on paper, so here you can see I have a strip of paper. It soaks in pretty quickly, and you see I can't move that color. I've now got my streak on my paper. But because I have my medium here, if I put that on, you can see here that I can move it and I can blend it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of it, and then working quickly, because although it doesn't dry immediately, it is still going to dry relatively quickly. I'm blending it in. So I'm just putting a little bit down, and then I'm using my finger, or you can use a wipe. This wipe is not very wet anymore, so it's okay to use that just to kind of blend it out a little bit. And it's always nice to work in layers whenever you're doing any kind of shading. It's better, you always want to build it up rather than putting too much at one time. So the same process that you see me using, laying down a little bit, rubbing it with my finger, I'm going to do that for the entire perimeter. And then in the corners, I'm going to go in, add a little bit more, pull that color into the corner so it's just a little bit deeper. And I'm keeping my baby wipe handy, and I'm using that to sort of dampen my finger to move the color. So I'm just going to finish around the perimeter of my coaster. So I've gone around the edge of my coaster. The other thing I just wanted to mention that you can do is you can take a little bit of the color and you can pull it inwards to the center so that your shading is not just limited to close to the edges. And then what this does is it just gives you some extra visual depth. And I don't know how well the camera picks it up, but in real life it just looks so much more dimensional than just the plain paper on there. So now that I've done that, and I may end up going back and adding more, but I think it's good for now, I'm going to add my focal image, which is this Paradise little card. Now, as you can see, it has a blue border all around it. So before I stick that down, what I want to do is to take my snips or my fine tip scissors and cut as close as I can to the yellow sort of postage style edge that this has, just to get rid of as much of that blue as I can. So I've finished cutting around my piece and I've placed it on my coaster where I want it to be. So I'm now just going to very carefully hold one side of it down while I lift it up, and then place a coat, a very thin coat of medium underneath, stick that down, and then go ahead and lift the other side. Now the reason I do it this way is because I know that I have the placement right where I want it to be, and then this way I don't accidentally put it on crooked by taking it completely off and laying my medium on. And then same way I did with the coat, with the paper on the coaster itself, I'm taking my craft scraper and I'm just smoothing it out, making sure there's no air bubbles. So there you can see what that looks like. So I'm now going to take my medium and I'm going to apply a thin coat, dry it, and then do that 2 more times. So I've applied 3 coats of my medium, drying in between, and I applied it to the entire surface, not just over the card. So my next step is the same thing I did with the perimeter of my coaster. I'm going to take my big brush pen and I'm just going to add a little bit of shading around the edge of this image. So I'm just applying it, as I showed you earlier, in little sections at a time, going around the entire perimeter. So I finished adding my shading around the side. It's just very subtle, but again, it adds more visual depth and dimension. So my next step is just to add a little bit of embellishment. Now when you're working with coasters, obviously because you're planning on putting cups on it, you can't put anything that's too dimensional or bulky. So what I decided to use was some liquid pearls by Ranger. Absolutely gorgeous colors and shimmer to them. They come in lots of different colors, and they don't dry super dimensionally. They do dry a little bit dimensionally, but not too bad, so it's perfect for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this peacock color, and where you see the border along the top of the paper, at the center of the swirls, I'm just squeezing my bottle and I'm adding little drops. Center of each of the swirls, going all the way across. And if you put too much or you muck up, as long as you work quickly, you can take a baby wipe and clean all that off. Now, and then start all over again. So now I'm going to take this hot cocoa color, which is very much like a copper color, and I'm going to place it in the center of the big flower, and then there's a couple smaller flowers here, and then there's one small flower down there. So you can see here I have them along the top, and there I have them in the center of the flowers. So at this point, I'm now going to set this aside to dry for a couple of hours. Once it's dry, I'm then going to coat it using this Krylon lacquer, and I'm going to give it probably about 4 coats. You do want to give it a lot of coats in order to make sure that the paper is really protected, because obviously if during sweat in the summer there's going to be moisture on here and you don't want to wreck the paper. Now there's one actually additional step that I forgot to mention, so hopefully I'm not going to wreck my liquid pearls as I do this. But the glass, you can see here, is just kind of a frosted color. One of the things that I did was I took my Pitt pen and I just rubbed it on the glass, along the edge of the glass, and then used my fingers to kind of rub it in. And what this does is this gives the glass just a little bit of a blue tinge. Now what the rubbing it in does, like you can leave it directly on that and you can see it's darker, or you can do what I did, which is take my finger and just rub it, and what that does is it'll kind of blend out any of the streak lines where the brush strokes overlap. But there you can see it's that blue versus that white. You see it a lot better in real life, and it just looks very beautiful around the edges. Now I'll finish that once my perfect liquid pearls are dry, and then at that point, once that's done, I'll go ahead and add my lacquer. So there you have it. That's how you alter a glass coaster. Now for the back, if you wanted to, you could take a blade, craft blade or X-Acto knife or something like that, and very carefully scrape this off and leave it as is, or put a piece of pattern paper on at the back to sort of cover that window and then just collage it. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scrape this off and then leave the coasters as they are at the back. So there you have it. The project's now finished. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 separate videos for this project. There's this one on decorating the coasters, and then the second one shows you how to decorate the coaster holder. Both videos have been uploaded to YouTube as well as placed on our blog. If you're watching this video on YouTube, then be sure to click on the link in the video description section, and it'll take you to the post you see here, and you'll be able to link to the second video from there. At the end of the week, one lucky winner is going to receive this amazing collection of Tropical Travelogue products generously provided by Graphic 45. All you have to do to enter is leave us a comment on that same post where you access the videos for today's project. Now be sure to visit our blog every day this week for more great projects using Graphic 45's Tropical Travelogue collection, and for more opportunities to win, as each day you leave a comment counts as one entry. See you on the blog!